back, everybody, to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I'm your host, Perry. With me, back in person for the first time in 2 weeks, it's Eric the Whiskey Mutant Smith.
There is no wrong time to rock, baby.
Hey, amen to that.
Is that right? Is that right?
It feels right.
That's right to me.
I'm feeling right.
All
and if
right.
I'm wrong, I don't... Wait.
Do you want to be right? Wait.
Sometimes.
I don't know.
I don't either. Hi, everybody. Hi, Eric.
What's up?
Hey, happy to be back in person.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can't even talk. I'm looking at you in the face.
I'm sorry.
I'm in my little spot over here, and we're across the table from each other.
This has been my sanctum sanctorum for the past 2 weeks because I haven't been able to see anybody, haven't been able to go anywhere, but when I sit here, I can talk to people and I can communicate again. And I don't feel like I'm cut off from the rest of the world, and it's just my happy little place. And now I can go lick flagpoles again.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you were doing before, definitely.
I mean, that's definitely not how I got COVID.
No, that was the side rails. Perry has a...
Excuse me, sir. Could you run your skateboard over the side rail so that I can then have a good lick?
Waxy.
A good lick. Well, if you are new to the show and you have not yet done so, please subscribe in your podcast app of choice. You can follow the show at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow Eric at Whiskey Mutant. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice. Thank you to everybody who has been leaving us 5-star ratings in the Spotify app, which is new, of course. And then you can also become a supporter of the show at patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. For as little as $5 a month, you get bonus content, including the new Patreon series, which is going to run for the next few weeks before we come back to Pours from the Floor. Sorry, we've got too many things that we do. The new series is called Simply Irresistible. And it's goofy and a lot of fun. But I go through a bunch of samples that I've had for a long time. But we normally start out this show with either Flying Blind or Sips and Snacks.
I got something.
What do you got this week?
Sips and Snacks.
Oh, boy.
From a friend of the show.
Oh, okay. Who? Is he going to give it a...
Brazo.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, he sent me a package.
What?
He sent me his package. What? No, wait.
Oh, no.
So,
Already
for the
off the
snack
rails.
portion, he sent this. I've never had this, but it looks interesting. Applets and Cotlets. Delightfully soft apple and apricot confections with walnuts and all natural flavors.
Huh. It looks like a Turkish Delight.
So, I was like, I'm going to bring that over. We're going to do it. And then he sent a bottle.
To pair with this? Is it Woodinville?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if he actually meant this to pair or if he was just like, hey, this is a weird snack. I'm going to send to Eric. But when you send me a bottle and you send me a snack, what are we going to do?
It's going to get paired.
It's going to get paired, and we're going to judge your pairing. So, Joseph Brazo, you're getting judged today. This is
not a judgment-free zone.
No. This is a Woodinville 100 proof, and it's... can you read this? Because I don't know how to read that. I know how to read, but I don't know how to pronounce it. It just sound bad.
Moscatel finished. It's a type of wine.
Okay. I mean, I was like, this is awesome. A big bottle for me, but I was like, I didn't know how to pronounce everything.
Okay, I can't read everything on this.
Yeah, me either.
But it's finished in 10-year-old Moscatel. Maybe
I need to read it?
barrels, maybe casks. I don't know.
Just go ahead and open it up there.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to sips and snacks it.
Heck yeah, we are. Maybe.
It's brand new. I should open it before in preparation. But you know what? We just do stuff on the fly. And while Perry's opening that, did you hear about Liquor Barn's new thing?
No, what about it?
The new pick thing they were going to do?
No.
Make your own picks. You can take a Knob Creek pick and pour it in a bottle with wild turkey. Did you hear about this?
No.
Of course, because it's a bad idea. McDonald's? Hack the menu? No, bad idea. It's not fun to just take chicken nuggets and put it on a burger.
We're going to be talking about...
Get out of here.
We're going to be talking about this for a long time, I feel like.
Yeah. Taco Bell, too.
Does Taco Bell have a hack menu? Oh, no, you're just still...
Probably. I mean, they could, because I could just order a chicken taco and a beef taco, put them together. Bam! Eric hacked the menu. Horrible idea.
Or you can say that you want a bunch of tacos, and the guy will give you crap for...
And then I'll say, you know what, man? Bell. I was trying to make an art project for my kids. We're going to play Hack the Menu with Taco Bell.
Hack the Menu.
And then he'd say, bro, Taco Bell? And then I'd drive off and be mad. No, I'm just saying that all is to say...
Flip them off. And
McDonald's Hack the Menu is the lamest thing I've ever heard.
It's still really dumb. We talked about it, was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it just gets stupider the more
the more you think about it.
The longer I hear that it's even a thing. But I don't know. Whatever.
What's that smell like? Wow, as I open this snack. Look at me. I started ranting. I could have been opening the snack while you were opening the bottle.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. It's kind of fruit punchy. I mean, it's got a lot of raspberries.
Oh wow. I just smelled of it as I broke from trying to... You got a knife over there?
I do not. I was using my bottle opener.
Let me see that. There we go. That smells really good.
It smells fantastic.
I'm intrigued by these little snacks.
It's a nice bouquet that you would find on a lot of red wines.
All right. There's two sides to this. One side contains the applets. The other side contains the cutlets.
This is the most complex sips and snacks we've ever done.
I know. There's instructions. All right. I guess we'll do one of each, right?
I guess so.
Cotlet. That feels funny.
What'd you call them?
Cotlet? Is that right? Am I saying it wrong?
I don't know.
I don't know. Applet? Okay.
They look like little Turkish delights. I mean, they really do. They're like dipped in powdered sugar.
Oh, man. This Woodinville smells really good. I have to get a flask and I'll pour some of this, a big chunk of this for you. He also sent cigars, which I need to share with you.
Oh, heck yeah.
Because I don't know nothing about cigars.
Do you know what he sent?
I got a picture.
I got no idea. I've never seen that brand before.
There's like 12 of them, though.
300 monos? Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Can we smoke in here?
No.
Oh. What if we open the garage door and we smoked outside?
If we did that, it would be completely fine.
Oh, we should do that.
We are... No. When it gets to be around summertime, we are 100% doing it. I mean, like springish time.
I gotta get to pairing some cigars because I don't know nothing about them.
But, like, in here, absolutely not. Like, because...
Yeah, well, you got a little doggy door and stuff there, too.
I got the doggy door. This is right below our bedroom, too.
Sure.
So...
I didn't think about that.
I've thought about it for a while.
Yeah, we'd do a summer episode where we open that up and we just smoke outside.
Yeah, we look like old people who sit out in their...
the little lawn chairs and stuff. There they are, old Eric and Perry, smoking cigars, drinking bourbon at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. This, by itself, is awesome.
It's really good.
It does. It smells like fruit punch.
Let me just say, I have not had anything from Woodinville that I have not just absolutely loved. Man. Everything that they put out, I have been a huge fan of.
That finish is straight up. It's like almost like bubblicious, kind of like fruity gum.
I'm getting a lot of chocolate, honestly.
You get chocolate on it?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of chocolate. I don't know how it's going to pair with these.
I don't
things.
Either. Which one you want to do first?
I think we should probably go.
See, the thing is, I looked when I looked the Woodinville up, their tasting notes had the same stuff in it. So then I was like, did he want us to pair this? Let me look it up. The finishing process adds notes of dried apricots and orange, is what they said.
So we have to pair it.
We have to
with these now.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's take let's take one bite out of each,
Okay.
and then we'll do like two of them squished together.
Okay. All right, the cutlet.
Oh, I went for the applet.
Not bad.
I enjoy that. It's very light and refreshing.
Hey. All right. Well,
That's pretty good.
We're doing the two opposite fruits, but this one's pretty good too. So I'll save that half.
Oh, man. Oh.
Oh, I get more chocolate now that I ate that.
And the applet brings out a lot of the red fruit.
Okay.
Wow.
I get a lot more chocolate now when I mix the cutlet.
It just exploded like at the back of my palate. That was crazy.
Oh, that's pretty good, Joe. All right, going for the applet.
I think I like the cutlet a little bit better.
Okay, the applet tastes like I'm eating what's that stuff your grandma would put in your bathroom that was like the little like
Potpourri.
Potpourri. It tastes like I'm eating potpourri. All right. And with the Woodinville.
Yeah, you're right. The cutlet does bring out more of the chocolate.
It just amplifies that like very like perfumey flavor to me.
Yeah.
If I'm going to like do a straight up pairing on this one, that cutlet in the Woodinville is like chocolate and apricot. Like it's really good.
Yeah. I'm definitely throwing the two of them together.
All right,
though,
here we go. Mixing them up. Both of them together are pretty good. Mm-hmm. The cutlet drowns out a little bit more of the perfume, and you get more of just the kind of the red fruit. I still think the cutlet and the Woodinville is the pairing on this one. That one, the two together is a better treat, but adding the Woodinville didn't do a whole lot more to it. But the cutlet and the Woodinville,
Yeah.
dang.
Interesting.
Well, that was random.
That was. I liked that, though.
That was really good.
That was a very different Sips and Snacks. I'm also hoping that you've got something different for this question that I'm about to ask you, which is, what have you been drinking recently?
Ooh, I do. So Banners, my local sports bar across the street. I got their new 1792 Foolproof.
The championship one?
Uh-huh.
How is it?
It smells like French toast.
Ooh.
I will bring it over.
Please do.
Next time. But the fun thing is like, I got a little, I just saw Ryan, the owner, he posted on the Banners thing, hey, new pick, come and get it.
Right.
And when I got up there, went to get it, and he was like, it was a low yield barrel. Like he was like,
wow.
I can't remember the exact number, but for like a 1792, it was pretty low. And so he said he keeps so many of them back for the bar, and then he keeps some back because he's the Banners picks, all the recent ones have all had like the Kentucky UK championships on it.
Yeah.
So he keeps them back for the bar. Then he keeps like a collection back so he can have like the full banner. I think he's going to make a big display with them and
That'd
stuff.
be awesome.
And he always gives like his pick team bottle, and then whatever's left, then he'll put out. And like, so there was not a whole lot left. And like, no joke, I love 1792 Foolproof picks.
I do too.
I think they're always solid. Sometimes they're kind of just mediocre. Like, hey, 125 proof 1792, it's good.
Yeah.
But this one, it smells like French toast, and it's more breakfasty and maybe cherry cola on the palate. And it's probably I haven't had a new 1792 Foolproof pick in a while, and it's probably one of my new favorite ones. So I will definitely bring that over for you.
It wouldn't last long here.
I will not leave it because I know.
No. But I mean, like, if I did have a bottle of it would not last very long.
I don't even know. They may. I think they're already sold out.
I'm sure they are. So about midway through quarantine, you came by, you dropped off a Whiskey Mutant shirt for me. which I love. And he also dropped off the Nulu Double Oak Perry's Punch, which is 120 proof. I still love this pick. I still think it's just fantastic.
Honestly,
and delicious.
After getting it home, like I love all three of those picks that we did, but like I probably went more into the Perry's Punch than I have anything. I'm trying to save the maple. Like I think the maple's special.
That's my bottle of the maple.
Yeah.
Like I only want to drink it. If I do drink it, it's gonna be on like either special occasions or just if I need something completely different to kind of reset my palate.
The sherbet is, yes, I say sherbet.
But so does everybody else.
I was corrected because I spelled sherbet wrong on the sticker. So if you get it, you've got like I do it like a basketball card error. Like you've got like an error card.
Everybody else says sherbet.
And
nobody says sherbet.
Sherbet or sherbet.
Shut up.
But
I've got a lot of animosity this week. I haven't seen anybody for 2 weeks. And so my vitriol is just all built up.
But it's good. It still is straight up sherbet. But I've almost crushed Perry's Punch.
Awesome.
And I've interrupted your what have you been drinking?
No. It's totally fine. But at the beginning of the week too, I received this Elijah Craig barrel proof single barrel, 11-year-old, 121.6 proof. Hands down the best pick we've had so far, I think.
I need to compare them. I know you've done some comparisons, but I can't think of maybe one or two that it's like in line with. Like we've had several of those picks now.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of the best.
Yeah. It's
from a grocery store.
Yeah.
And I got another one coming, not that one I was going to tell you about.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to be drinking?
Yeah, it's what I'm going to be drinking when I finally pick it up. I'll tell you about it
What
later.
you drinking, what you going to drink?
Yeah, in a couple of weeks.
You see where
Possibly two.
You see where the influence for this segment came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except it's early on in the podcast, not towards the end. All right. So this week, I am very fortunate to welcome to the show Clay Risen, who is an incredible author. His new book, Bourbon, The Story of Kentucky Whiskey, is out now. You can find it in most major retailers or on Amazon. I believe that they had a sale going for it recently for about 30% off. So if you want to check that out, you can go do so. So, Clay, I'm really happy to have you on the podcast, man. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'll give a little bit of insight as to why now I asked you to be on the show. I was in Joseph Beth Booksellers here in Lexington, Kentucky, and I happened across your new book, and I was like, this is amazing, and I need it, and I want to talk to this guy. And sure enough, I reached out to you on Instagram, and I said, hey, do you want to talk for a little while about bourbon and about your book? And you said, yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. Yeah. So I was like, okay, great. let's go ahead and get it scheduled. But for anybody who might not know who you are, Clay, give everybody just kind of a little bit of a background on you.
Yeah. So my name is Clay Risen. I'm a reporter and editor at the New York Times, where, among other things, I write about whiskey. And I've been writing about whiskey for about 15 years now. And I've got I have 4 books, not about 4 books. I have 4. Most recent, I should know that.
One's a novella. We haven't,
Yeah, right. That was my awkward phase. So the most recent one, as you mentioned, came out in December, and it is called Bourbon, The Story of Kentucky Whiskey. And it's, a big, I guess you could call it a coffee table book. It's fatter than it is a bit wider, right? But it's that general thing. And it's has a drawer, it has ephemera in it, but it also has a book, obviously. And, in it, I go through the kind of the warp and weft of Kentucky whiskey, the history, the people, the profiles of distilleries, all the companies that support the distilleries, cooperages and
Yeah.
farmers and everything in between. So it was a lot of fun to do, and I'm tickled to be here to talk about it.
I will say I don't think that I have seen as good of an example in a bourbon book that, and I guess pun intended, but distilled basically everything about bourbon so concisely, but so efficiently as well. Like it's about like 250 pages,
Yeah.
right? There's not a lot of fat left. I mean, like it is just very much like, this is the story of it. This is the basic history of it. And let's talk about the places that make it and how, just the basic, like, how does it get made from barrel to bottle, essentially. And I really like that about it, because I think that we can get really, really bogged down in a lot of the weeds of just like flowery language when it comes to talking about history, and just, kind of glossing over a lot of what the point is. And it feels like a lot of that comes naturally, especially because of your reporting background as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the things that I really wanted to do when I wrote this book was to write something that was both appealing to people who knew a good amount about bourbon, a good amount about whiskey, but also was not, as you said, like so far in the weeds that people who didn't know and were maybe looking for something to kind of help them walk through the whiskey world, that they would find it interesting too. And so that was maybe the main challenge. And that was the challenge that my editor put to me. She had first, it was her idea to do the book and, or to do the book in this way. Yeah. And one of the things she had said was, she lives in San Francisco, and she said, well, I was in Kentucky. This is a few years ago now. But I was in Kentucky with some friends, and I didn't know anything about whiskey, but we had a great time. And we had sort of come looking for kind of that Napa experience, but with whiskey, and, and we found it. But, I came away, and she's a book editor, so obviously she thinks this. She said, I came away wishing that there were a book that someone like me could buy and display, but also really learn from. And so, what I said back to her was, I'd love to do that, but I want to make sure that it's a book that people who do know about whiskey aren't going to turn away from, because, it's all 101 stuff. So, and she agreed. She said, that's exactly it. And so, I think the book helped. The book benefits a lot too from the presentation and the layout. This is not me, so I can brag on it, but the layout team was great. The photography team was great, or the photographer, Luke Sherritt, was amazing. And, they really zeroed in on putting together visually and tactilely, a book that reflected the theme and the feel that I was going for with the text. And I think they nailed it. So I'm very happy with that aspect of it. Yeah. It's something that, I think does kind of, I hope, pay, do honor, say something nice about the whiskey industry, but also is, as I said, sort of outward looking to say, hey, you don't know anything about whiskey? This book is going to help you know something from whiskey.
And I think it also kind of begs the reader to be more inquisitive as well. Just because it does such a good job of like introducing you to the key players and showing people like who these whiskey legends were with bourbon, and then it just gives you also like the scientific analysis of bourbon and like explaining like at a base level, what does malt even do in a mash bill? And I mean, like that's something that I like as soon as I learned that, it just became it like just opened up this whole world for me of like, oh my gosh, it's not just this easy process of creating bourbon. And sometimes they have to put in secondary for whatever it is to create fermentation. I cannot think of what it is right now, but just things like that, and just like the knowledge. It feels like the more you look into it, your knowledge about bourbon is just kind of growing by like 100% every time that you learn something new about it. And like this book, and by the way, I didn't say this up top, it is gorgeous. I mean, truly, it is so pretty. But it does like it makes you just want to sit and read and absorb everything that is being presented.
Yeah. One of another challenge that I faced, or inspiration really. So before this book, my publisher, 10 Speed Press, they had done a book about the Champagne region in France. And it very similar in that same design, same kind of 2-part sleeve, box with the drawer and then with the book. And a lot of that book was about the history and the people and everything that made Champagne, right? The Champagne region, the Champagne drink, wine that we consume. So part of the challenge that she presented to me was, I want a book like this, but for bourbon. And so, my response to her was, that's a great idea. I love it. But also it's going to be tough to do a book that's exactly like that, because Champagne has, to be honest, a much longer, much denser history. I would say, I think we'd be close to that if we didn't have Prohibition. But, we basically started over in 1933. So
that's a very good
point. We can look back and say, they've been making bourbon for over 200 years in Kentucky, but in another way, they've only been making it for 90 years.
Yeah.
So, so I said, so we have to adjust for that. And I have to come up with ways to talk about it in something similar, but also different. And so, but one of the things that I took away from that book, and I recommend anybody who likes Champagne, wants to learn about Champagne, should get it. But one of the things I took away was, that there was a lot to know about Champagne, and honestly, a lot more than I thought. I don't know anything about Champagne, or I didn't before I read this book. And aside from learning about it, I took away, that there is a standard of information, and there is a lot of stuff to know and a lot of detail, and it's worth knowing. I think that's the other thing, is the book argued and demonstrated it's worth knowing who these people are, what this history is. And so I wanted to do the same thing with this. And for me, it was even more urgent, right? With Champagne, you sort of assume that, there are some people who've been making Champagne for a long time and they know what they're doing and there's some details. I assume that it's complicated. With bourbon, I don't think people necessarily see it that way. And so what I wanted to do is to both present that information, but also to glorify it in a certain way, to say, yes, it is worth truly appreciating what goes into making bourbon, because it's really hard. Yeah. And, not just the distillation, but the coopering, the building of the stills, the building of the warehouses, and the decisions about what goes where in each warehouse, and how you, over years and years, decide this barrel is ready and this barrel is not ready, and we're going to use this barrel to do this other thing. It's an immense amount of information, most of which, depending on the distillery, most of which is fairly analog. It's not like they're going around testing each one with with chemical analysis and then putting it on the computer. Some places do that, but a lot of them, it's just, that barrel has these qualities, it's not ready, this one. And, you have to be really knowledgeable and really in touch with your warehouses to be able to do that. And you have to be part of a team that does that. And so it's a really, especially at a big place like Wild Turkey, you really have to have a good team and a good manager. And so I wanted to communicate that and to say, when you go visit a distillery, they're going to give you the nickel and dime tour, and they're going to give you the 101. And of course they are, because that's what that's what most people are looking for. They're not going to overload you with information, but don't come away thinking that that's all there is.
Right.
And hopefully they'll go on the tours, they'll read my book, but they'll also dive even deeper and really come to understand these nuances. Not everybody, and everyone can get off the bus at a different point. But, I want people to understand that bus ride is really long if they want to stay on.
I will say, too, I think that you do just a very effective job of describing how bourbon and truly just American whiskey has just been shaped so vigorously by like a handful of people. Like the talking especially about James Crowe.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating to me that he was the one that he introduced basically sour mash to people.
Mm-hmm.
Just incredible. And that nobody ever really thought to use any of the leftover mash for their next batch of whiskey. And it always just takes one person to hop in and go, yeah, maybe we should try this, or, I've been doing this and maybe you guys should try it as well. But what's really nice talking about as well, your bus metaphor, is that this is basically broken up into like three categories. Essentially, I think like three larger categories, like history, the distilleries, and then like essentially how it's made.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, I mean, if you know most of the history, you can get right to the distilleries. If you know most of the distilleries and the history, and you just want to learn more about the science behind it and the barrels and everything, that's there for you as well. But there's also this, there's this very intimate relationship just with bourbon in general throughout all of it. And you start the book with a couple. I want to touch on two things in particular. The first was your story about going and playing golf with your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulled out Blanton's.
Right.
Do you still drink Blanton's like that? Or
it's funny because I've been telling that story for a while because it's true, and and me, it's a touching. I mean, me personally, I'm glad my grandfather introduced me to good bourbon.
Of course,
that's cool. For a long time, well, it kind of went through three phases, right? First was I would tell people this, and even some people, a good number of whiskey fans would say, Blanton, which one is that? Wait, that's not Baker's, right? That's Booker's. Oh, Blanton. Okay, right. And then
still don't really know what you're talking about either.
Yeah. And then there was kind of a middle period where you'd get, a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, Blanton's. Yeah, I've seen that on the shelf, but can you get me some Pappy? And, it was, and then about 2.5 years ago, I was in a liquor store in New York, just kind of killing some time. And I always knew this was going to happen, but it kind of hit me just like a train. I saw Blanton's for $250.
Oh,
and it was, it had been a while.
Demoralizing.
It was insane. And it had been a while since I'd looked at the price of Blanton's, because honestly, it had always been $55-$60. And, I like Blanton's. I'll be honest, after a while, it was not my favorite anymore. Sure. But whatever, each their own. But, every once in a while I would buy a bottle at $50-$60. Hadn't bought a bottle in a while. I saw it at $250 and was just, oh my God. And, and it's just gone up from there. I mean, I don't know what it is in Lexington these days, but, in New York, you see it for $350 sometimes. And that's on the shelf. The market for the secondary market is insane for Blanton's. And, the liquor hasn't changed. In fact, Blanton's today is not what Blanton's used to be. It's it's a younger, they're putting younger juice in there. And, man, so
I didn't want to bring that up on the podcast. Like, that is something that I have been kind of circling around being aware of for a little while, but it is so sad because it's gotten down to like 4 or 5 years old at times.
Yeah.
It's so unfortunate.
It is. And, I mean, distilleries are going to do what they do, but it is, I think, the sad side of the bourbon craze is that stuff that used to just be low hanging fruit. I mean,
yeah,
folks who have been around long enough and this is true if you've been around for 5 years, because you'll say, oh, I remember when I could get Blanton's, but if you've been around for 10 years, 15 years, you say, oh, I remember when Pappy was $100.
Yeah.
When, Pappy 23 was 150, $200. And, that wasn't that long ago, really. And, so it's nice to see whiskey being popular and something we can talk about, and I can go on podcasts and talk about,
right.
But yeah, it's kind of a bummer at the same time.
Does the introduction of some of these newer distilleries, some of these newer brands for you outweigh that feeling of, well, things really aren't how they used to be? Like, is it a good thing essentially for bourbon, or are we always going to have like those times where we're like, I remember the days of old, and we could.
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's in one way or the other. That's just part of the human condition, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Things were better back then, and so it doesn't. That's just a function of time. I mean, sometimes it's true. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's just what you're looking back at.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I am really happy that there are so many great distilleries now. And those distilleries probably would not exist if there weren't so much interest in whiskey. So, does that outweigh the availability of some of these or the, reasonable availability of some of these iconic brands?
Sure.
I think so, because it's pointing toward the future. When I think of a place like Wilderness Trace or New Riff, these just great young distilleries, and they're already. I mean, I love their stuff so much now, and I think about 20 years from now, what's a good bottle of Wilderness Trail going to be like? It's going to be amazing.
It's funny because those were the two distilleries too that immediately popped to my mind. Just thinking about like the new guard that is kind of like ushering in these products that are essentially going to be heritage brands in 50, 60, 70 years.
Yeah. And so, would I take 4 or 5 of those over, cheap Pappy? And yeah, I would. Yeah, absolutely.
You've heard it here first, folks. I mean, that is.
I mean, no offense.
That's a
no
fine
offense to
answer.
folks at Pappy. But I will gladly accept not being able to buy Pappy every day in exchange for 4 or 5 or more great distilleries that would not exist without this craze.
This is also something that we've been talking about on the podcast for the past couple of weeks, but it's this, and this is a very like personal thing that I've been feeling over the past 6 months or so, but it really does just kind of seem like heritage brands don't matter as much as they used to. And if they do, it's to people who are forking over, 10 times the price of what it actually is supposed to be. And it's more of a status thing than it is like to enjoy the actual whiskey.
I think so. I mean, I guess I would say it's a little uneven.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm not trying to say that it's 100% black and white or one way or the other.
No, I just mean that there are some heritage brands that are a lot of them that are insanely popular for reasons that I can't fathom. Like,
sure,
basic Buffalo Trace is a perfectly fine $35 whiskey. The idea that is on allocation because people are buying it every chance they can get is insane to me, because there are a lot of other equally good whiskeys at that price point, and I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. But that said, look, wild turkey, it's just sitting there. No one's buying wild. I mean, no one's going after wild turkey that way. And thank God,
Yeah.
And I would take Russell's 10, 101. I'd probably take those next to Buffalo Trace over Buffalo Trace. I mean, it's weird, but I agree that there are these brands that, for whatever reason are well positioned. They've got big budgets behind them. They've got cachet, and they tend to attract people who, they're probably not as versed in whiskey. They're coming to the industry because their friends are in it. They're coming to the collecting, and they're not that interested in the drinking part. They're really interested in the collecting, the status part.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, what incentive do you have to then go, oh, you know what? I was listening to this podcast and I heard Clay Risen talking about Wilderness Trail and I went out and bought it. Well, that doesn't matter if you don't really care about what's in it, or if your friends don't care, or if your friends are really impressed if you've got a 10-year-old Michter's or whatever. So, I'm of two minds of that, right? I mean, part of me says, you're an idiot. And, what are you thinking? And, you need to open your eyes. On the other hand, am I not sad that I can find a bottle of Wilderness Trail on the shelf for the same price as I used to? And, that my Russell's 10 is always going to be there. Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. So, that's the thing. It's, and as long as there are those brands, as long as there's shelter from the storm somewhere, I'm fine with it.
I came to the peace of mind probably within the past couple of months that Russell's 10 is not only an okay replacement for McKenna 10 single barrel, which, of course, we used to be able to find all the time for $30. But
that's another one that's one.
Yeah. But it's not, it doesn't just feel like a replacement anymore because of how great that whiskey is. I mean, it's just an incredible product. And I mean, like, I do at times feel like, I'm just trying to find the next thing that I can, try to say, like, just, keep shifting the field goal, to keep saying, well, I'm going to get there eventually, but, I've got to, figure out my stuff before I actually reach it. But I just, McKenna 10 absolutely Russell's 10. McKenna 10, I can't hardly talk about anymore because, it's like a Spartan ex-lover. But I do want to circle back. This was actually the other thing that I wanted to talk about at the opening of the book, but it's actually about the Russells, because you spend a significant portion of the beginning of the book talking about Wild Turkey and Jimmy and Eddie. And I think that not only are they just kind of like the perfect introduction to a family brand, but really just to what bourbon is right now as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this is no huge insight on my part, but, I think that Jimmy obviously he's a living legend, but, he connects us to a period in whiskey making that is long forgotten by almost everybody else. There are a few guys left, but it's mostly Jimmy, and certainly in terms, maybe Jim Rutledge, but in terms of people still on the scene working, it's Jimmy. But also Jimmy personally. There's he is all the cliches, right? He's a prince of a guy. He's just a real good old boy in the positive sense of just, doesn't have any airs about him, doesn't have an enemy, doesn't have a stranger is just a friend you haven't met with Jimmy.
Yeah.
And he's a straightforward guy in that respect. And I think that Kentucky whiskey to me is that, and maybe not always in practice, and certainly not today in every way, but it should be, and it used to be. and hopefully it still can be. But that's why I went with them, because I thought that they had just that, and of course the father-son dynamic is valuable.
Yeah.
In terms of storytelling. I think it's also valuable for the industry to know about that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I think the No's have that story too. It's a little different. I do spend time with them later on. But there's just something about Jimmy and Eddie as a dynamic that is fascinating to me. So opening the book just almost felt like almost a no-brainer.
And I think too, like it's not just father and son; it's father, son, and grandson.
Well, yeah,
too,
and Bruce is there.
Yeah. And that's such a fascinating facet within whiskey making right now. I mean, like truly, who are the other families that we can point to that have?
Yeah,
like the Beams, and then that's it. The Beams.
Pretty much. I mean, it's it's too bad, because I think a lot of these guys, Fred No and Eddie are kind of unique in that everybody else of their generation looked at what their dads were doing, and they said, in the 70s and 80s, what they were going through.
Yeah.
And they said, there is no future here for us. This is a dying industry, and I am not going to be a part of it. And, I've never actually asked that of some of the older, Elmer's gone, but,
well, yeah.
But people like that. What did their kids do instead? And where did they go? And, and you got to wonder, you got to figure that things would have been different had the industry not gone through that kind of fallow period. You might have more of that generation of folks. Yeah. And instead you have, really just two. There are a few others out there who are like Steve Beam and some others who are picking up
true. Yeah.
Kind of their heritage after a period. They're kind of bringing it back, but not direct father-son relationships. And and that's a bummer. That really,
absolutely.
To put it simply, because that's what separates bourbon from, you see this out in California and in the wine industry. There's a lot of generational transfer. There's a lot in France, obviously. And, maybe that'll happen in whiskey. I mean, I think things are looking pretty good for that, but obviously we've got a long way to go. But it would be really cool if the kids of some of the founders of this generation of whiskey making found themselves in the industry, so that 50 years from now, we could talk about, picking that back up.
Yeah.
Because so much, and the other thing, and something that if I were to do the book over, one thing I would add to it was, I would go and try to interview, get in touch with, just kind of profile some warehouse workers. And,
wow, okay.
Because those are people who also, those are intergenerational jobs. You get people who have been working for a distillery, same distillery, or just in the same industry as their parents, their grandparents. And, they're sharing knowledge too. They're passing down wisdom about, how do you run a warehouse? How do you pick barrels? How do you, maintain a warehouse through the seasons? And, I think that's really important. And I mentioned in a few places, but keep it very anonymous. There are these people who work in the warehouses and work in the labs. And, but I would go a little deeper, and I would actually put some faces and names to those folks, because I think that's an important part of that transfer. Yeah. And I think paying attention to that and talking about those folks, is a way of encouraging, in the little bit that I can do. But, of saying, like, you guys do an important thing, and we want to, hopefully this continues.
So kind of tangentially, I want to talk about something that I remember when this came up last year, but I want to start it out. I don't know how you feel about people reading your work to you, but I had to highlight a particular passage, just talking about the current bourbon boom. You said, aside from an elite few, most people paid for value, cheap, reliable booze won the day. Lately, the opposite is true. People are drinking less, but they are drinking better, and more of them are doing it. Despite growth in the amount of alcohol sold, per capita alcohol consumption has increased only marginally from 2.2 gallons of pure alcohol in 2002 to 2.35 in 2018. And there was something about this that sparked my memory about this study from or this article at the very least from CNN, and it was from 2020. And the headline is just, young Americans are more likely to say no to alcohol. And what struck me so much about this, even just as I went back and read this article again, your numbers, your date range lines up perfectly with what CNN reported on. But on the flip side, so they said between 2002 and 2018, the number of adults aged 18 to 22 in the U.S. who abstained from drinking alcohol increased from 20 to 28% for those in college. For those not in school, the percentage was 30% up from 24% in 2002. And this just kind of like, it got me going, like, is this just another instance where we're kind of seeing people shine away from what, like, their I don't want to say ancestors, because a lot of them are still alive, but, like, you know, their parents and their grandparents, like, are they starting to just kind of shy away from the things that they enjoyed in life? Or, and I'm trying to paint that as a prettier picture, I think, than, you know, it may deserve, because alcohol abuse is not, it's not something to joke about either.
No, sure.
But I wonder if there's like this, it's interesting to me to see like these two things line up so well.
Yeah.
Did I do too much research? Like, did my brain go in too many different directions?
No, I think that's, look, I mean, I think that's a good question. And, you know, if what you're asking is, you know, what should we think about this trend of drinking less? I mean, if that's
essentially yes. Yeah. Are we seeing essentially, you know, the dark days of bourbon in one form or another coming our way? And I know that you say within the book too that, like, the bubble is not bursting anytime soon, and it does just kind of keep like creeping away from the goal line. But, like, if we see just, you know, based on statistics, the amount of people that are drinking less and less, I mean, does that indicate another shift?
No, I think so. I think there's a couple of things going on, and a couple of things that make it different from the past. You know, if in the past, let's say up until 1970, the period, let's say from Prohibition to 1970, you know, people generally drank whiskey like a commodity. They tended to have their favorite whiskey and they would drink it, but you couldn't really say, you know, it's sort of like some people are Bud Light drinkers and some are Coors Light drinkers, and I don't know what's the difference, but they will tell you that they drink one or the other. You know, so the same thing in the 30s to the 70s, you know, people tend to say, well, I drink this and that's why I drink, and I drink a lot of it, or I don't drink a lot of it, but I tend to pay the same amount with inflation, and you know, not a lot of thinking about what was in there, despite marketing and whatever people would try to tell you. And then at a certain point, people stopped drinking brown spirits and moved toward white spirits, generally speaking. So, but the other thing is that we're talking about a pretty closed system. Most of the whiskey consumed in the United States was made in the United States or Canada. You know, there's some amount of Scotch that was consumed, more than now, but generally speaking, you're talking about American whiskey being drunk by Americans, Canadian being drunk by Canadians and Americans. But it's very different now. And there are two things, right? So first of all is that premiumization and an awareness of premiumization. So not only that people are drinking more, they're drinking less, but they're drinking more expensive whiskey, but they're also drinking different whiskeys. You know, so you don't have that brand loyalty. You have a lot more curiosity you have a lot more kind of jumping around and trying. I feel like
absolutely.
I feel like rye tonight. I feel like finished wine finished scotch tonight. I feel whatever. I feel like a cocktail. You have a lot of that, and a lot more attention to what the distilleries do, right? Rather than just sort of, I'm going to hang my flag with this brand.
Sure.
So that's much more, I think, generative for the industry, right? So yeah, maybe they're not selling the same amount per capita, but they're making more money per capita, and they're doing more stuff. They kind of know how to generate interest. But the other thing that's happening is that you go to talk to a lot of distilleries, particularly the big ones, and they'll tell you off the record, or maybe on the record if you get them drunk. They'll tell you that demand in the United States could flatline tomorrow, and it wouldn't matter because all of their plans are foreign.
Sure.
The domestic market is great, but the domestic market will hit saturation at some point. And I believe that we're not there yet, but we're going to get to it. There are a lot of other spirits that are challenging whiskey. Tequila is blowing up. Challenging American whiskey. Irish whiskey is going through the roof. Then these companies, they look abroad and they do their market testing, and they see, oh my God, all we have to do is capture 1% of the market in China, and we have all the demand we need for a decade, right? Indonesia, Malaysia, if we ever get into India, middle class in Africa. I mean, different people have different targets, but that's the general direction. And so, I don't worry a lot about, is the bubble going to burst? Are we seeing a new sort of pulling away now? Because I just think it's a different story than it used to be.
I like to, and this was not me trying to like bait you into one answer or another, because like I feel very strongly that it also is not a way, or it also is not something that we should look at and think negatively about. And I mean, from experience, I'm 28. I mean, I've not even crossed the threshold of 30, and I basically got into bourbon when I was about 22, 23, and it was early, but still, like I had friends who enjoyed bourbon, and I got to know people who had just a passion for it, and it made me excited about it and wanted to learn more and just be involved. And even just being a Kentuckian, I mean, it feels so ingrained in, not that my family were whiskey makers as far as I know, but it does feel like just part of our heritage. I mean, it is America's native spirit, and we we should take some pride in that. But I truly do not think that we are going to see this just evaporate anytime soon. But it's something that I always kind of like want to have even just little conversations about, because I mean, it's important. What are we looking at, trajectory wise? What is your 5-year plan essentially with bourbon? What's going to happen very soon? But it's nice to kind of, even if it may be inside a small vacuum here, that, there are slight things that are going to keep it going, even if it might not be in the same vein that we have kind of had for a while.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the one thing that I do think will happen is, maybe I'm just struck by the last couple of days, the Discus, the Distilled Spirits Council, their report came out just showing, what I said before about this dramatic increase in tequila sales. And, now people are, so there's more tequila sold in the US than whiskey. And, now there's some talk about, well, maybe it could even overtake vodka. And, tequila's here to stay. Tequila's always been here.
Yeah.
Do I think that people are going to be sipping tequila in the way they sip bourbon? Probably, I don't know. Who knows?
I've seen it happen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not, it doesn't not exist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's still mostly a cocktail drink.
Yeah, exactly.
But look, there's some great tequilas out there, and I am glad to see tequila growing that way. But I guess my point is that, look, whiskey has to share the shelf, of course. But I don't really think that, at least not at this moment, that it's a question of being crowded out. I don't think it's a zero-sum game right now.
Right.
I think a lot of it is just figuring out how to capture some of that mind share of consumers who, they want to try one thing one night, they want to try something the other night, and making sure that, whiskey is interesting to them.
I have a goal at the very least, like something I want to see happen. And like after it happens, if the bubble bursts, I'll be okay with it. I've just got to know what the bourbon at Castle and Key is like. I've just got to know what their own product is going to actually look like once it is their own brand.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about it.
Yeah, I'm excited,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see, and I'd like to see that place really take off as there's so much, it's beautiful what they've done with it. But
you're talking very diplomatically right now, I feel like.
No.
Okay.
I mean in terms of a destination, not so much the whiskey. It's
okay.
They've talked about there's a building across the street from the main distillery. They've talked about turning that into a hotel.
Yeah.
Building out more of the offerings there. I just think it's a cool site.
Yeah.
I remember, as well, when I was in my 20s, I would, I'd go visit my brother who was still in Nashville, and we'd drive up for a day to visit distilleries. And, there were a couple of times when we drove past the old, what was the old Taylor distillery.
Yeah.
And we never jumped the fence. We never went in, but we were always really curious. And that's sort of it's just this beautiful ruin of a place, and thinking, God, you know what? It'd be so cool if someone did something with that. But at the time, this was mid 2000s. It wasn't apparent that there was going to be this boom where someone would come along with a bunch of money and say, we're going to turn that into a distillery. So, it was more this kind of pie in the sky. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a theme park. Maybe it'll be a private house. I don't know, but it'd be cool to see. And now that they've done it, it's a kind of a barometer for me of where whiskey is going. If we got to the point, and we've now been 8 years since then, but we got to the point where someone bought that place and turned it into a distillery, that really says something, because I just thought we were so far away from it. And I still think, and so the more they do with it, the more I look at it and say, see, I still have confidence in this industry.
Sure.
So aside from what they actually make, right, which is of course the really important question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that they've been mildly successful so far with their rye whiskey. That's kind of it's nice to hear that from somebody else who is not within my own little sounding board, because it feels like it wasn't made for me. And in turn, I feel like it wasn't necessarily made for a lot of the people who might, not necessarily be as ingrained in the industry as we are, but just it just feels like it is being catered more towards. And this hasn't. I don't want to touch on Marianne's departure too much, because I think that's it's completely irrelevant to what the distillery is doing right now. But I do think that, there was a shift once she left, and it became more about, well, what can we do to appeal to the actual consumer, and what can we do to, give somebody a, the tchotchke to just kind of take home and, feel like they have a unique part of the distillery or the experience and everything. But I don't know. It's just a product that I feel it's just kind of like, okay. Like I feel like it should have come out of the gate just wowing us, coming from this historic distillery that was, rebuilt from it's not ruins, but it was just hoisted up
I hear you. And look, I mean, I was pretty wowed by New Riff's juice when they came out.
Yeah.
Wilderness Trail hit the ground running. Bunch of them. And I sort of would have put Castle and Key in that category of just, very well funded, very well thought through distillery projects. But you're right. It just, I certainly wouldn't put it in their ranks. Now, give them a couple of years. This is obviously they're putting out what they have.
Yeah.
But
I hope it gets to that point in a couple of years. But I want to circle back to something real quick though, because you did say that you never hopped the fence at the Old Taylor Distillery.
Yeah.
But that certainly implies that maybe you did that somewhere else when you were traveling around and seeking out some abandoned distilleries. You don't have to name it. It didn't actually happen.
I got in enough trouble in my own state. I didn't want to go to someone else's state and get in trouble there. So.
You didn't need your picture up in the post office in Kentucky as well.
No, I was very happy to be a guest in Kentucky and kind of wanted to keep it that way.
I'm not entirely opposed to that being the answer, but just part of me was like, oh, come on, he's got to have like a little juice.
Yeah, I wish. I did have. Well, I'll tell you one story. This is not that bad, but my brother. This was 2006, maybe 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. My brother and I had started. I lived in Washington, and there's a bar really close to me that had a really fantastic bourbon selection. Even today, they would be considered to have a good bourbon selection. And one thing they had was a bunch of Willets, which at the time, that was my introduction to Willet. Was they had a bunch of barrel family estate selections. Looking back on it, some amazing stuff for sale for what felt like a really high price. It's $18 a pour, but it was Rathskeller rye, for basically nothing. Yeah. And so I really wanted to go to the Willet distillery. Now at the time, they didn't have it was this place. They weren't making whiskey.
Right. Yeah.
And they weren't taking guests. Most places they didn't have a guest program. But my brother and I nevertheless thought, well, what if we just go? Like, they might say hi.
Show up. Yeah.
Yeah, just show up. So we found where it was, and we went there, and we pulled in, and at the time it was, it may have been a paved road, maybe not. I think it was paved, but in my mind it wasn't.
It's gravel now, so
yeah. Okay. So I'm right. So it was gravel. So we pull up, and there's nobody there, and then someone came out, and I don't know who it was. I didn't know anybody at Willet at the time, so I couldn't have identified anybody. And but this woman was dead set on getting us out of there as soon as possible, in the gruffest possible way. And, without any expletives, she basically cursed us out. You get that, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Get out of here. And we said, well, we're hoping we could get a tour. And she softened a little bit, but it was like, well, no, we don't do that. We're not open to guests. Get out of here.
Right.
And I sort of assumed that either something really sketchy was going on, which probably wasn't, but who knows? Or probably more the case that we were not the first people to do this, and that other people, maybe even that day, had gotten in their heads like, oh, I bet we could get some really cheap Willet if we just go to the Willet distillery or whatever. And she was busy doing something, or they were busy with their actual jobs.
Right.
And, just really weren't interested in saying, now, obviously today, everything's different at Willet. But that, that's maybe the one point where I feel like, nothing illegal, but certainly unwelcome.
What a shift it's been in bourbon since then.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, back then, we would just drive up to distilleries, and if there was a tour going on already, they'd just let you join the tour. There was no charge for tours, no one charged. Samples were free. They limited you, if they were careful, but you just sort of roll in and see what's going on. But the flip side was there weren't that many places. So, Maker's Mark, Four Roses. We never went to Wild Turkey, but I guess this was before their new visitor center, but I guess they had something.
They did. It was across the street from where it is now.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the last time that I was there with my mom, she had said that she pointed it out, and she was like, "Oh, you see that little? It essentially looks like a little house." And she was like, "That was their visitor center back in the day."
Yeah, and then Woodford was the other one that was really out there as Woodford was the is sort of the archetypal new distillery in that regard, right? It was designed as this is a place where people are going to come check out what we're doing, and we want to put our best face forward and really be welcoming. So the whole thing is designed around the visitor experience. Now you go to a place, any new distillery, and Lux Row, the whole, and Lux Row is beautiful. I love that distillery, but the whole thing is built around the visitor experience, and taking you through the whole distilling process and tasting process in a way that's very amenable to visitors, and maybe not to the distillery. I don't know. But someone put a lot of thought into how do people from the outside come in and see this? And that is not what they were doing with those distilleries 15 years ago.
What kind of shocked you the most as you were doing the research for the book? Like because I you have all these memories and experiences that you had before, and not necessarily it doesn't have to be like an experience thing, but like what really just kind of like knocked you back a little bit when you were going through the writing process for the book?
Knocked me back. I don't know. I've become a really big fan of barrels in a way that I don't think I was before I worked on the book.
They're so beautiful, man.
They're so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Everyone I talk to, whenever they ask, hey, so which distilleries should I go to? I always tell them, look, if you can get to Lebanon, go to the ISC cooperage and take the tour there, because you can go to another distillery and be another distillery.
Essentially,
and it's fine, but if you're going to go to 4 distilleries, go to 3 and go to ISC, because you will learn so much about barrel making. And so that was one where I think I learned the most about whiskey, in terms of starting with the book and finishing. Probably the most I learned was in that category. And just, and I mean, Kelvin doesn't do tours, but talking to the folks at Kelvin, and then, spending a lot of time I've been to a couple of different ISC facilities and spent a lot of time with Brad Boswell, and just the technology that, and again, I think for me, a barrel is, in that same way that Jimmy Russell kind of encapsulates this forward-looking, backward-looking tradition and innovation thing about American whiskey, about bourbon. I think ISC is part of that too.
Sure.
Because the amount of technology that goes into making those barrels is astounding. I mean, both in terms of the organic analysis of the wood and how they treat the wood in order to get certain qualities, and what their ability to dial in certain aspects and certain flavor profiles into a barrel, simply by the way they age it, and all using traditional applications. They're not chemically treating the wood or anything. I mean, this is all just doing what they've always done, but in this incredibly precise, very informed way. But then at the same time, these are organic products, and that there is a certain point where Brad Boswell will tell you, like, look, at the end of the day, this is wood, and some wood's going to break, some wood's going to go one way when you think it'll go the other, and you can only do so much. And at a certain point, the science stops and the craftsmanship begins. And part of craftsmanship is working with the, not flaws, but the uniqueness and the organic quality of the thing. The other thing that blew my mind that I just didn't know, and maybe everybody else in whiskey knows this, but so we were walking around the stave yard, and I noticed, I think he was trying to get me to notice. But you go and look at the staves, and there are these mushrooms growing on them. And, really, like, there's one with just this thick blanket of mushrooms. And I look, what is that? And he said, oh, we want that. That's actually that's part of every, and it's all about, so the mushrooms grow on the wood, and they release certain chemicals that help in the seasoning process. And so one of the reasons why they will keep them outside in the rain and in the snow is to promote that fungal growth.
Oh my gosh.
That is desirable in a well-seasoned stave of wood. I had never heard that. I'd never seen that. But
why wouldn't that be something they didn't want? Like, I mean, I understand because it imparts all those flavors, and I mean, it can, be just very beneficial to the whiskey at hand. But like, you just naturally would be like, yeah, we don't want any fungus growing around the whiskey that we're making. So.
And honestly, it's just, and to me, it was typical of some of the other experiences I had with the book. They were just peeling back layers. So it's not like I didn't appreciate that a lot of work went into making a barrel, of course, but peeling back those layers and going, oh, there's even more that goes into this than I thought. I spent some time, interviewing a farmer who grows corn and wheat. He provides the wheat for Maker's Mark. And, just talking to him about the intense specifications that go into the grain that he grows for distilleries, versus for bakers or, more kind of commodity grain that he grows for other people. He said distillers are very particular, and, you really have to almost run a second operation just for them. And, that's not something that I had really thought about. It's intuitive. I mean, I'm not surprised, but also to hear the details, that was pretty interesting and pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
And I could say the same story about, distilleries I went to, Vendome. Vendome is a magic land. I think that what those guys do at Vendome is out of this world. And to think that, I'm young enough to have watched all these factories close around this country and feel like, oh, we just don't do stuff. We don't make stuff anymore. And then you go to a place like Vendome and you see, oh, not only do we make stuff, but they're not using computers and machinery. I mean, they do, but most of it's by hand.
Sure.
And what these guys, the amount of work, the amount of training that goes into being a master coppersmith, just so you can make a still that, we'll make the best whiskey in the world. It'll be the best still in the world. But, I think sometimes people take for granted what goes into making a still.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I hope someday, Vendome was kind enough to welcome me in to do, do a press interview, check out the space.
Sure.
But they're not open to the public. And I hope they are. I hope they do open to the public someday, because I think that would be really cool for people to see.
I think this shows a little bit of, where my blind spots are in whiskey making, but the discussion just simply, and it didn't take up but like a page of, pot stills versus column stills. And it's so funny because right before I read that part of the book, I saw just a tweet that was like, we all just have to admit it. Column stills make better whiskey than pot stills do. And stepping back and kind of looking at it a little bit objectively, I can see where people might feel that, because as I learned from the book, pot stills have to be cleaned after every use. And that is so much more work than I feel like, it should take just to make it. And not that, it's an easy process, but like, my first thought was some guy going in, like it opens up like Luke's house on Tatooine, and he's just able to go in with like a toothbrush and he's just scrubbing it, like something like that,
Yeah.
But, and I'm sure it's just running, grain alcohol through to actually clear it out. But like, I can kind of like make a little bit of that same conclusion jump by thinking about, oh yeah, column stills probably do make slightly better whiskey because there are things that are kind of hanging around from previous mashes or batches or whatever.
Yeah, I think, I think, Lou Bryson makes this distinction among others, but I think it depends on what you want to make.
Sure. Of course.
Column stills are great for barley, and there's a reason. One, tradition is a big reason, but one reason why Scotch, why single malt Scotch is made on a pot still, whereas with with a bourbon mash, column stills make more sense, and you can run through all the reasons, and so it's and obviously you can make bourbon on a pot still if you want, but like you said, it's it's a lot of work. I mean, you've got a mash. It's also, you're working with a mash instead of a strained, a wort. So, it's one thing if you've got a wort and you put that into a pot still, it's just liquid. But, you put your nasty solids and goopy stuff into that still and into a pot still, and you've got to be really careful not to burn it. And then you still have to clean it up. So a column still makes more sense, just like you said, for the efficiency.
I want to talk about this, and I think this might wind up being the most talked about passage from the book, because I know that you were talking about this with David from Whiskey in My Wedding Ring recently too. But it's this whole discussion on in the early 20th century, how, and this is a major shift, by the way, away from what we were just talking about. So everybody strap in to, just shift gears. But just the use of Black Americans in such negative ways to promote and advertise whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about like things that shocked me while I was reading the book, I think this is the one thing that really kind of caught me the most off guard. And it's not to say that I shouldn't have in some way anticipated it, especially just, based on the depth of knowledge that you bring to the book, but just knowing about Jim Crow and knowing about the way that Black Americans have been treated within the United States. Mm-hmm. And that was, I mean, it took me a couple of read throughs to just go, that doesn't sound too far off from things that we are seeing today. right? I mean, it's not that, things are as explicit as they were in the early 1900s, but the deep-seated like racism of it all still feels very like there still feels a shift, or excuse me, not a shift, but like a split within whiskey. And I know that, there are things like the Black Bourbon Guild and fresh bourbon, but it just doesn't feel as unified right now as I think it could be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, the difference I would say is that there's at least some awareness. And
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Different, not uniform and not always well-intentioned. But, for the most part, particularly at the corporate level, there's a decent awareness that this is, if nothing else, a market imperative. Right. That you need to be more inclusive at every level, from employment, in all departments, not just marketing, not just, but actually in the distilling and the tasting and the blending, all of those. But, also on the part of, consumers that you've got to market to you have to find ways to market to people who, look, I mean, I've known, I don't want to say, I mean, this comes dangerously close to saying some of my best friends are Black, but, it's having,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have such a strong reaction to that, but it is like it is hard to not like, just because of the fact that phrase exists. Like,
I know.
At it slightly.
No, but what I was going to say is just, having, grown up, maybe I think just growing up in Tennessee, everyone drinks brown liquor. And so, the idea that Black people drink bourbon is not surprising. And what is surprising is that it's not something that's marketed to them until recently. And some brands have started to try to do better. But one of the things that I found, and I didn't mention in the book, but I've talked about in some of my articles, is that in the 60s, there actually was a real push. And there were some brands that were really good at marketing in a very non-condescending, inclusive way toward Black consumers. And part of that was just born of the optimism of civil rights. This belief that, hey, pretty soon, all these differences are going to be erased, and Black consumers and white consumers, it's not going to make a difference. And so, there's a series of ads that Old Taylor ran, which I guess at that time was owned by National. Sure. But the series of, and it was photos of a, really well-dressed, pretty, I mean, you would assume well-off Black couple, young couple, walking around the Old Taylor distillery. I mean, what today is Castle and Key, but at the time was Old Taylor. And, they're having a great time just walking around, and it's nothing other. You could easily have a white couple in there. And yet it's, at least to my eyes, it's what we would expect. It's what we'd want to see today. Right. And there was a lot of other examples of that. And it's weird that you today have people saying, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to market. I don't know how to engage. We as a brand, right? We don't know how to engage with anyone other than white people. And that's insane. That's ridiculous. And, and so I do think, it's not like we've gone backward to some of those ads that I talk about in the book, which, I don't really feature, but they're easy to find online and they're horrific.
I actually I found a little bit of solace in the fact that you didn't include them in the book. It was, I kind of quickly looked at the next page, am I going to see some examples of this right now? But they weren't there, but it's in doing so feels like an elevation or, a allowing people to, see that these things are real. And I mean, just giving them a space where they don't necessarily need one. So, I mean, it was kind of nice to not actually see them.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I needed to do that, and I didn't want to. There's a certain tone that I was trying to set with the book, right? And part of that is telling an unvarnished story, but not necessarily leaning into the unvarnished parts too much. And one of the nice things about writing a book in the 21st century is that you can kind of assume that people will go find that stuff if they want to. And as long as you're clear about what it is in the text, someone who wants to can go look for these ads, and there are articles that talk about them, and they'll see them. I don't feel that if I don't show them to people, they're never going to see them. So, it's a little, I do feel an obligation to talk about them and not to, because that is a big part of the story of whiskey in the early 20th century. But, I don't necessarily feel the need to throw it in someone's face in a book like this.
No, yeah, you're right. It is a celebration. It's not a condemnation of things. So yeah, I think that's totally admirable, we'll say. But I just want to kind of wrap things up. And I know that was not necessarily the most positive note to wrap things up. But at the same time.
No, but let me just add, and just to say this, I mean, I think it's positive in the sense that, these are things that you just have to talk about.
Absolutely. It is okay to be uncomfortable.
It is. And it's, not that every problem is the same or that there isn't a unique concern here, but also no history is without its dark sides, and no culture is without its less reputable aspects. But the important thing is that we talk about it, and that we say, hey, this thing that happened is not right, and what do we do better? And hopefully we learn from that. And I think that as imperfect as the whiskey industry is now, there are a lot of people, whether they're individuals, like you mentioned, Fresh Bourbon, those folks are doing some great stuff, or some of the folks at some of the more enlightened distilleries, and the fact that you have a consumer push, whether it's Black Bourbon Society, the KOBBE, these are folks who are taking the initiative to tell a story on their own and to tell their version of this thing that they like and that they're fans of. And so, for me, that is a hugely positive thing. And so, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but that's the only way to move ahead. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And certainly we are moving in the right direction. It feels like it at the very least. But I meant to ask you this at the top of the interview, but I like to start episodes off by asking people, what have you been drinking recently? So I have to just wrap it up with asking you, Clay, what have you been drinking recently?
Well, I was just drinking tonight. One of the whiskeys that kind of fell through I just didn't get to try last year, was the Russell's 13 that came out. And so I was emailing. I think I didn't mean this as a plea, but I think I said on Twitter something like, "Oh man." Oh, it was someone was going on about how great it is. And I think I said something like, "Oh man, well now I'm never going to get to try it." And some super cool dude DM'd me and said, "Hey man, I'd be more than happy to send you a sample."
There you go.
Which is, to me, you talk about sort of the less comfortable parts of whiskey. Well, this is one of the really comfortable parts. And it's that, right? It's
Absolutely.
that someone's going to see me on Twitter, never met face to face, and is going to mail me. And he threw some other stuff in too. And that was super cool.
That's fantastic.
And so, I was drinking that. It's great. It was everything I had hoped it would be and more. What else? I got a barrel pick of Knob Creek that was really good.
Oh,
And and a barrel pick of Wilderness Trail Rye that just blew me away.
fantastic.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was great. And
Yeah.
and then just little stuff, stuff in the mail. I mean, I get samples and I try them, and. What about you? What's your dream of choice?
So now I've got to shift at least a little slightly. But so two things of note. I realized that I had just a 375 of makers sitting around, which I had not even opened. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just an exceptionally good bottle, but this has been one of the best experiences I have had with just standard 90 proof Maker's Mark, maybe ever. I mean, it just felt fuller than it has before, and felt like it just was. It felt more inviting and welcoming, and I just 2 to 4 ounces in, just kind of feel like I want to. And it's just regular Makers. Like I just kind of want to hold on to it for a little while. You know what I mean?
That's great. Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, we received our sample of the Barrel Seagrass 16 today.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I am blown away by.
Everybody is.
I cannot get over how just unique of a product this is. The first sip, I felt like I needed to put myself in timeout to kind of assess my feelings and my thoughts and everything.
Yeah.
But it's a phenomenal whiskey. It is a phenomenal whiskey.
Yeah. It really won the year, I think. That and the Russells.
Oh, Russell's 13 was.
Yeah.
That was my number 2 for last year.
Yeah. I can see why.
Well, Clay, thank you so much, man, for sitting down with me for this episode. This has just been wonderful.
My pleasure. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So everybody be sure to go out and pick up. It's Bourbon. I'm sorry, I got to scroll all the way back up to the top. So unprofessional. The Story of Kentucky Whiskey. Bourbon, the Story of Kentucky Whiskey. I apologize. Yeah. But it's so good. I mean, even if you don't pick it up from a local bookstore, it's on Amazon. I saw it on sale recently on Amazon. So I don't know
they've
if
got
it's
it on
still
sale.
Happening. But just really, really good stuff. I encourage everybody to pick it up, especially if they are trying to just expand their bourbon knowledge or get somebody that they know to learn a little bit more about bourbon. Really, really great book. We'll put a link in the description of the episode as well so people can find it. But Clay, also, where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Twitter at Risenc, Risenc. Same thing on Instagram, Risenc.
There you go, man.
There you go.
Clay, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
All right, Eric. What tips and/or bits do you have this week?
Oh, honestly, I am in full blown, and people are going to be like, really? He's talking about Star Wars again? Okay, I'm in full blown Star Wars right now, okay? You know why? Because I've mentioned on here that, or maybe just Patreon, I don't know. But me and April are going to Disney World.
Yep.
In April for her birthday. Yes, she was named after the month. Yes, it's a whole thing. Don't worry about it.
We've already talked about it.
Yeah, we talked about it. But we like to go to Disney World on our own, like at least once a year, just because we're big Disney fans.
Yeah.
And it's fun. We take the kids to a couple of months later for summer vacation usually. But this is our trip, and we're actually doing like all 4 parks, all that together. Awesome. But if you've ever been, and then recently, you know that 60 days out, you can start making your reservations for things.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can start getting on there. People just get on there. You get on the app, start reserving. And I haven't had a chance to do it yet, and I finally got my reservation to build my own lightsaber.
Oh, dude.
Yes! So I'm in like full-blown Star Wars mode right now. So I will update everybody later on when I start building my own lightsaber at Disney. I don't even know if I can do it live because I've been listening to there's a podcast called The Princess and the Scoundrel.
Okay.
And they are Disney, like the girl is a Disney travel agent, and she specializes in like Star Wars stuff. Like they're going to get to do the Galactic Cruiser and all that stuff, which is crazy. I would love to do that. I don't have the money to do that.
It's way too expensive for what it is.
But so they had an episode on building lightsabers because I want to be ready. You know, I want to be ready.
Yeah.
And apparently it's like they treat it because I've never seen when I've been at Galaxy's Edge. I've not seen like big signs. They don't have signs everywhere. This looks like straight up like out of Star Wars if you've never been. And since lightsabers are kind of like a, the Empire and all that, like they don't talk about it much. It's like a speakeasy type deal. You make your reservation and you go to, I think it's Savo's, and you have to be like, I'm looking to buy some scrap. And they call it scrap.
Right.
But you're really going in there to build your lightsaber.
I'm so jealous. I'm so unnecessarily jealous about this.
So I'm in full-blown Star Wars mode right now. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I started playing again Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order on PlayStation.
Oh, yeah.
I've beat it.
What are the two? There's two like retro Star Wars games that are on the Switch. Too.
Oh gosh. Is it the 64 one? Is that one on there?
64 or PlayStation?
I
can't remember either.
But this one is like...
If I had my Switch with me, I could look it up.
The latest game that's on PlayStation, they're getting ready to do another one, but this is Jedi Fallen Order. It's probably one of the last games that I like 100%ed.
Wow.
But you follow this young Jedi who survived after Order 66, basically.
Yeah.
And his name's Cal. And as you go through it, you find lightsaber parts, and you can customize your lightsaber to however you want, different moves, everything. It's so fun. I highly recommend this game if you are a Star Wars fan. And if you've seen the Book of Boba Fett, there is a little droid you see walking around that kind of looks like the head of like Johnny Five.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's Cal's droid. I don't know if it's the same droid that's in the Book of Boba Fett,
right?
Or if it's just the same model. It's a BD droid. They call him BD.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I really think there's some stuff that's going to tie in from that video game too, because it's such a big story. It's so fun. I'm going back through it, and I'm having just as much fun. It gives me anxiety sometimes, the stuff you got to do, but it's just so fun. And I always recommend watching Clone Wars and Rebels if you haven't, and if you watch Book of Boba Fett. And the only other thing I would recommend is I got to redeem myself, because if you watch my Instagram live, you saw that I made my wife watch this anime called Prison School. It's very, very not kid friendly. It's not straight up really bad stuff. It's just, you got to have a sense of humor, and you got to just not take things so seriously. But I wanted to recommend a anime called Your Name, and it's a movie, and it's just a really good story. The art's beautiful, and it's something you can watch with your family.
Right.
It's basically like a time travel / anime where this boy and girl, they kind of meet each other, but they're in different timelines, and they switch places and all this stuff. And the art is just amazing. The story is well written, and it's just something you can throw on there with anybody in your house. Like, there's nothing inappropriate, nothing crazy Dragon Ball Z, just fighting the whole time and yelling. So right. I just wanted to recommend an anime if people saw on my Instagram that I was talking about Prison School, which is not something I would recommend for everybody.
At least one of the Star Wars games that are on Switch is Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast.
Oh. Is that PlayStation?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the first one is on there too. I'm like 98% sure, because I think I have both of them.
I I always loved the Nintendo 64 one, Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, yeah.
You fight like Boba Fett and stuff.
They're doing
in
a
it.
remake of it.
Oh, I'll have to definitely get
Yeah,
that.
I'm really excited for that. I don't have a whole lot this week.
You've just been binging everything.
I kind of have been, but like at the same time, I don't know. I haven't been in the right mindset to like watch something new and really enjoy it. You know what I mean?
I think we need to do Patreon episodes on Book of Boba Fett and Peacemaker.
Yeah, we're going to. Yeah.
I think like a 15-minute episode on each, just recapping the whole season and talking about what we think about it. Like, I think we definitely need to do that. Like, we could just something we could knock out during the week just for Patreon or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the season finale for Peacemaker came out, and it was unbelievable.
Holy cow.
It was the wildest thing I've seen in a very long time. And I mean, that's on top of this whole season just being bananas. So,
I love bananas. Like, I like bananas, but I'm saying, I was trying to say, I like shows that are bananas, like just crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
but yeah, we need to do that for Patreon, of course. But, gosh, I mean, really not a whole, we tried watching, okay, here's something. We got through most of it, but we got tired and depressed. Spencer, which is the Princess Diana movie with Kristen Stewart.
Okay.
It is so sad.
Oh no.
It is so hard to get through. I mean, like, it just makes me depressed watching it and just anxious too. And like, we pretty much know, the story of like how she fell out of love with Charles and everything. But, I don't know. Kristen Stewart is such an enigma to me because, like, I don't hate her as an actress, but the things that I've seen her in have always been like a little something extra, please. Just give me a little.
Does she play Princess?
Yes.
I can't see that. I don't know. I just can't see that. Like,
it's weird. It's very weird.
Like, I always thought when I was younger, like, I thought she was Princess Di was like this, like, very like
supermodel,
super beautiful thing. And I'm not saying Kristen Stewart isn't a pretty person, but I only see her as like this, like, flat, like, kind of, even in Twilight, they didn't even like do anything. She was just, I don't know. I'm burying myself right now. So I'm just saying, all I'm trying to say is I don't see Kristen Stewart being Princess Di.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really got past it being Kristen Stewart either. Like, I feel like she could have, I don't know. I think The Crown on Netflix did a better job of casting Princess Di than they did with this movie. But people love her in this movie. And I mean, she's nominated for an Academy Award, so I can only say so much. I'm not a film critic. I have a podcast. I'm a guy with
We have
an
a bourbon
opinion.
podcast, and we like to talk about other stuff sometimes. So
Anyway. Well, I think that does it for this week, though. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Clay, once again for sitting down with me for that interview. Eric, where the heck can people follow us and follow up with us and the things that they can do to support the show?
Things they can do. First off, you can support the show at Patreon/MyBourbonPodcast for as little as $1 a month. At $5, you get all the extra content, extra episodes, uncut stuff. I mean, we're doing like TV show reviews. It's just everything on there. Like, definitely check that out. The show has bills to pay, stuff to do, all that. Support us on Patreon. If you want to send a question or a comment, or if you want to ask for the address where to send some samples or something to review, this is mybourbonshop@gmail.com. You can get some merch at bourbonshop.threadless.com. There's Whiskey Mutant merch at whiskeymutant.myshopify.com. If you want to leave a voicemail, and we'll play it on air, and then we'll reply to you and talk about you and whatever you want. Even Charlie Brown's done this before. You can leave a voicemail at 859-428-8253. And then on social media, we have a Facebook group on Facebook. This is My Bourbon Podcast Facebook group. You can ask questions for the Patreon episodes there, share memes, just everybody's just in there hanging out. Twitter, Instagram, all that. My Bourbon Pod. And then you can follow me at Whiskey Mutant on Instagram. You can follow Perry at PRitter1792 on Instagram and Twitter. And then YouTube, this is My Bourbon Podcast. Perry goes live every Thursday at 8. I join him about once a month, and, we do games on there. Perry does reviews, or he just hangs out and drinks bourbon with people.
Which is fun.
Which is always fun. And then if you want to leave a review, just go to not Shopify. I always say Shopify and Spotify are killing me right now. Leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. If it's bad or good, we'll read it out. And if it's bad,
it's true. We will.
We'll probably say something about you.
Yeah. But we'll also say, all right.
Yeah. It's fine. But leave a review. We'll read it out here. And then you can just
tell your friends about the show.
Share it.
Share with your friends.
Post about it.
We're
Tell
here.
them about us. Bourbon Podcast with pop culture stuff at the end and a little bit of everything in between.
Exactly.
So
next week, though, big review episode.
Yes, we got reviews to do.
And next week as well, because by popular demand, I've been reminded that people really enjoyed this. We're going to get back to doing some news.
News?
Yeah.
Oh.
People have been asking me.
Have I even got to do news yet?
No. Not once. It's okay.
Snack news?
No. Bourbon news.
Oh.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I'm going to find something about snacks to put in this thing.
Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. All right. Thank you guys as always for listening. We will see you next week. But until then, I am Perry.
I'm Eric.
And this is My Bourbon Podcast.